The people who effortlessly achieve their goals and create lasting change know something that the rest of us are missing. It's not what you think, and it's definitely not what they teach in motivational seminars. They've discovered that motivation is actually the enemy of real transformation. Stay with me because this changes everything you believe about success, willpower, and what it really takes to become the person you want to be. The motivation trap. Have you ever noticed how the harder you try to stay motivated, the more elusive lasting change becomes? There's something happening beneath the surface that most of us miss because we're focused on finding the next source of inspiration, the next powerful reason to change, the next emotional high that will finally make us stick to our commitments. Picture this all too familiar cycle. You watch an inspiring video, read a transformative book, or have a moment of clarity about what you want to change in your life. The motivation feels electric. You're absolutely certain this time will be different. You create elaborate plans, make bold commitments, and for a few days or maybe even weeks, you're unstoppable. You feel like you finally cracked the code. But then something shifts. The initial excitement fades. The inspiration wears thin. Life gets busy, challenges arise, and suddenly that burning desire that felt so permanent just disappears. You find yourself back where you started, only now with an added layer of shame about your inability to maintain what felt so clear and compelling just days before. You tell yourself you need more motivation. You search for new sources of inspiration, new reasons why this goal matters, new emotional fuel to reignite that fire. But deep down, you sense you're caught in a cycle that no amount of motivation seems capable of breaking. The harder you chase inspiration, the more fleeting it becomes. I understand this struggle intimately because I've lived it. That internal battle between knowing what you want to achieve and feeling completely powerless when the motivation inevitably fades. The frustration of watching others seem to effortlessly maintain consistency while you're constantly starting over, constantly looking for that next hit of inspiration to get you moving again. Here's what we've been missing about lasting change. Motivation is designed to fade. It's an emotional state, and like all emotions, it's temporary by nature. Building your transformation on motivation is like building a house on quicksand. No matter how strong the initial foundation feels, it's inherently unstable. Think of motivation like weather. Sometimes it's sunny and perfect, sometimes it's stormy and challenging. If you only took action when the weather was perfect, you'd accomplish very little. The people who create lasting change have learned to take action regardless of the weather, regardless of how they feel, regardless of whether they're motivated or not.
The real breakthrough comes when you understand that your dependence on motivation isn't helping you, it's hindering you. It's keeping you in a constant state of waiting for the right feeling, the right moment, the right level of inspiration. Meanwhile, the people who are actually creating the results you want have moved beyond motivation entirely into something far more reliable and powerful. What if your struggles with motivation have been trying to teach you something essential about what real transformation requires? What if the key to lasting change isn't finding better motivation, but learning to act effectively without it? The nature of true power. Let me tell you about Sarah, a marketing executive who spent 3 years trying to write her first novel. She had all the motivation in the world, a story she was passionate about, dreams of being a published author, and deep emotional reasons why this book mattered to her. She attended writing conferences, joined motivation groups, and surrounded herself with inspirational quotes about following your dreams. But despite all this motivation, Sarah wrote inconsistently. Some weeks she'd write every day, fueled by inspiration and excitement. Other weeks, when life got stressful or the writing felt difficult, she'd write nothing at all. After 3 years, she had a collection of partial chapters, abandoned outlines, and a growing sense of failure. Everything changed when Sarah stopped relying on motivation entirely. Instead of waiting to feel inspired, she committed to writing for exactly 30 minutes every morning before work, regardless of how she felt. Some days she felt like writing, some days she didn't, but she wrote anyway. The quality varied wildly at first, but something profound began to happen. Within 6 months, Sarah had completed her first draft. Not because she was more motivated than before, In fact, she often felt less inspired than during her previous attempts. But she had developed something far more valuable than motivation: the ability to act independently of her feelings. This reveals something profound about human nature. Our emotions, including motivation, are unreliable guides for consistent action. They fluctuate based on circumstances, energy levels, hormone cycles, and countless other variables beyond our control. Building your success on something so variable is inherently unstable. Here's what transforms everything about achievement and lasting change. Discipline isn't about forcing yourself to do things you don't want to do. True discipline is about developing the capacity to act in alignment with your deeper commitments regardless of your momentary emotional state. It's about becoming someone who can be trusted with their own dreams because their actions don't depend on their feelings. While most people chase motivation through external sources, videos, books, other people's success stories, true power comes from developing internal systems that generate consistent action independent of inspiration. It's about creating what I call motivationless momentum, the ability to move forward even when, especially when, you don't feel like it. Like a river that flows consistently regardless of weather conditions, disciplined action creates its own momentum. It doesn't need external fuel because it's powered by something deeper than emotion. It's powered by identity, by who you've decided to become, by commitments that transcend feelings.
When you learn to act from this place of disciplined identity rather than emotional motivation, something beautiful happens. You stop being at the mercy of your moods. You stop waiting for the right moment or the right feeling. You become someone who simply does what they've committed to do, regardless of circumstances. And this reliability becomes the foundation for extraordinary results. The 4 foundations. The journey from motivation-dependent action to discipline mastery isn't built through willpower alone. It emerges through understanding and applying 4 foundational principles that create sustainable transformation from the inside out. Foundation 1. Identity shift. Most people approach discipline backwards. They try to force themselves to act differently while maintaining the same identity. They want to be consistent while still seeing themselves as someone who struggles with consistency. They want to be disciplined while still identifying as someone who needs motivation to act. True discipline begins with an identity shift, a fundamental change in how you see yourself and what you believe about your nature. This isn't about positive thinking or affirmations. It's about consciously choosing to embody the identity of someone who acts on their commitments regardless of how they feel. The key insight is that your actions flow from your identity, not the other way around. If you see yourself as someone who needs to feel motivated to act, you'll continue creating evidence for that belief. But if you begin to see yourself as someone who acts regardless of motivation, your behavior will naturally align with that identity. This identity shift requires what I call micro-commitments, small, specific actions that provide evidence for your new identity. Instead of trying to completely overhaul your life, you choose one simple behavior that you can do consistently regardless of your emotional state. Maybe it's making your bed every morning, doing 10 push-ups, or writing 1 paragraph. The specific action matters less than the consistency. Each time you follow through on this micro-commitment, especially when you don't feel like doing it, you're providing evidence that you're becoming someone who can be trusted with larger commitments. You're proving to yourself that your actions don't depend on your feelings. Over time, this evidence accumulates into genuine identity change. You stop seeing yourself as someone who struggles with discipline and start seeing yourself as someone who naturally follows through on commitments. This isn't self-deception. It's based on concrete evidence of how you actually behave when tested. The beautiful paradox is that once this identity becomes stable, discipline stops feeling like discipline. It becomes simply what you do because it's who you are. The person who exercises every morning doesn't need motivation to exercise any more than they need motivation to brush their teeth. It's just part of their identity. Foundation 2. Systems thinking. Motivation focuses on outcomes. I want to lose weight. I want to write a book. I want to build a business. Discipline focuses on systems, the repeatable processes that inevitably lead to those outcomes when followed consistently over time.
Systems thinking means shifting your attention from the end goal to the daily behaviors that create that goal. Instead of focusing on losing 30 pounds, you focus on the daily eating and movement habits that naturally result in weight loss. Instead of focusing on writing a book, you focus on the daily writing practice that naturally produces a completed manuscript. This shift is crucial because outcomes are often delayed and can feel abstract or overwhelming. But systems are immediate and concrete. You can't control whether you lose weight today, but you can control whether you follow your eating system today. You can't control whether your book gets published, but you can control whether you complete your writing session today. The power of systems thinking is that it removes the emotional volatility from the process. Your feelings about the ultimate outcome don't matter for today's actions. You simply follow your system because that's what the system requires, not because you feel motivated about the distant goal. Effective systems have several key characteristics. They're specific. Instead of exercise more, your system might be 20 minutes of walking immediately after breakfast. They're scheduled, built into your calendar like any other important appointment. They're sustainable, designed to be maintainable even during difficult periods. And they're evidence-based, connected to specific behaviors that you know lead to your desired outcomes. Most importantly, good systems account for human nature. They anticipate that you won't always feel motivated, that life will sometimes interfere, that you'll occasionally fail to execute perfectly. They're designed to be resilient to these normal human variations rather than being derailed by them. The goal isn't to create the perfect system, but to create a system that you can follow imperfectly but consistently. A simple system followed consistently will always outperform a perfect system followed sporadically. Foundation 3. Process mastery. Motivation seeks immediate gratification and visible progress. Discipline embraces what I call process mastery, the ability to find satisfaction in the daily practice itself rather than needing constant evidence of results. Process mastery means learning to measure success differently. Instead of only celebrating outcomes, you celebrate consistency. Instead of only tracking results, you track adherence to your systems. Instead of only feeling successful when you see dramatic change, you feel successful when you show up as committed regardless of visible progress. This requires developing what psychologists call process focus versus outcome focus. When you're process focused, your satisfaction comes from executing your system well, not from the results that system produces. This is crucial because results often lag behind actions by weeks, months, or even years. Consider a writer working on their first novel. If they're outcome focused, they'll feel unsuccessful for months or years while working on the book, because the outcome, publication, is distant and uncertain. But if they're process focused, they can feel successful every day they complete their writing session, regardless of whether that particular session produced brilliant prose. Process mastery also involves developing tolerance for what feels like boring consistency. Motivation thrives on novelty and excitement. Discipline finds deep satisfaction in the reliability of showing up, in the compound effects of small actions repeated over time, and in the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you can trust yourself to follow through.
This doesn't mean the process becomes joyless or mechanical. Many people discover that as they develop process mastery, they actually begin to enjoy the daily practice more than they enjoyed the sporadic bursts of motivated action.
There's a meditative quality to consistent practice, a sense of craftsmanship and mastery that develops over time. The key is learning to find meaning and satisfaction in the practice itself, not just in what the practice might eventually produce. When you can genuinely enjoy or at least appreciate the daily work for its own sake, consistency becomes natural rather than forced. Foundation 4. Emotional independence. Perhaps the most crucial foundation is developing what I call emotional independence, the ability to act in alignment with your commitments regardless of your emotional state. This doesn't mean suppressing emotions or pretending they don't matter. It means not allowing them to dictate your behavior. Emotional independence recognizes that feelings are information, not instructions. When you feel unmotivated, tired, or resistant, these feelings might be telling you something useful about your energy levels, your approach, or your underlying needs. But they don't automatically mean you should abandon your commitments or wait for better feelings. This requires developing sophisticated emotional skills. You learn to acknowledge your feelings without being controlled by them. You might say to yourself, "I notice I'm feeling resistant to this task right now. That's interesting information, and I'm gonna do it anyway because it aligns with who I've decided to become." Emotional independence also involves understanding the difference between comfort and harm. Being emotionally uncomfortable, feeling unmotivated, slightly tired, or resistant is very different from pushing yourself in ways that are actually harmful. Learning this distinction allows you to act despite discomfort, while still honoring genuine limitations. One powerful practice for developing emotional independence is what I call emotional aikido, using the energy of your resistance to fuel your action rather than fighting against it. Instead of trying to generate motivation, you acknowledge your lack of motivation and use that as evidence of your growing discipline. I don't feel like doing this, which makes it the perfect opportunity to practice acting regardless of my feelings. Over time, this practice creates profound internal freedom. You realize that your emotional state doesn't have to determine your choices. You can feel unmotivated and still act. You can feel tired and still show up. You can feel resistant and still follow through. This realization is incredibly liberating because it means your success is no longer dependent on circumstances beyond your control. The architecture of reliability. Understanding how to replace motivation with discipline requires grasping what I call the architecture of reliability, the internal structures that make consistent action inevitable rather than dependent on external circumstances or internal states. Reliability isn't built through grand gestures or perfect performance. It's built through small, consistent choices that compound over time into unshakable habits and identity. Each time you choose to act in alignment with your commitments despite not feeling motivated, you're adding another brick to this architecture.
The key insight is that reliability creates its own momentum. When you consistently follow through on small commitments, you develop what psychologists call self-efficacy, confidence in your ability to execute on your intentions. This confidence makes future execution easier, not because you need less discipline, but because you have concrete evidence that you can act regardless of how you feel. This architecture also includes what I call failure protocols, predetermined responses to the inevitable moments when you don't follow through perfectly. Instead of allowing occasional lapses to derail your entire system, you have specific plans for how to return to your commitments quickly and without self-judgment. For example, if your system is to write for 30 minutes every morning and you miss a day, your failure protocol might be to write for 15 minutes the next day rather than trying to make up the full time. This prevents the all or nothing thinking that often turns minor lapses into major setbacks. The architecture of reliability also recognizes that different types of commitments require different approaches. Some actions benefit from being scheduled at the same time every day. Others work better when tied to existing habits. Some need external accountability, while others work best when kept private until they're established.
Understanding these nuances allows you to design systems that work with your personality, schedule, and circumstances rather than against them. The goal isn't to force yourself into someone else's approach to discipline, but to create your own reliable architecture based on what actually works for your specific situation and psychology. The compound effect. One of the most powerful aspects of replacing motivation with discipline is understanding how consistent action compounds over time in ways that sporadic, motivated action never can. This compound effect operates on multiple levels: skills, identity, momentum, and results. At the skill level, consistent daily practice develops competence in ways that intermittent bursts of activity cannot. The writer who writes for 30 minutes every day will develop their craft faster than the writer who occasionally writes for 3 hours when inspired. The consistency allows for continuous learning, adjustment, and refinement. At the identity level, consistent action provides constant evidence for who you're becoming. Each day you act disciplined, you strengthen your identity as a disciplined person. This identity change then makes future disciplined action feel more natural and automatic. At the momentum level, consistent action builds what I call behavioral momentum, a psychological force that makes it easier to continue than to stop. Just as a train that's already moving requires less energy to keep moving than to start from a standstill, established patterns of disciplined action require less effort to maintain than to restart. At the results level, consistent small actions often produce exponentially better results than sporadic large actions. This is because most meaningful achievements require sustained effort over time, and the compound nature of learning and improvement means that later efforts build on earlier ones in multiplicative rather than additive ways.
Perhaps most importantly, the compound effect of discipline extends beyond specific goals to your overall capacity for creating change in your life. As you develop discipline in one area, you're simultaneously developing the meta-skill of acting independently of your feelings. This meta-skill then transfers to every other area where you want to create change. The person who develops discipline around daily exercise doesn't just get physically fit, they develop the capacity to act consistently in their career, their relationships, their creative pursuits, and any other area where consistent action creates results. They become someone who can be trusted with their own dreams across all domains of life. Practical implementation. Moving from theory to practice requires a systematic approach that accounts for the realities of human psychology and the common obstacles that derail even well-intentioned efforts to develop discipline. Start with what I call the minimum viable discipline, the smallest possible commitment you can make that still provides evidence for your new identity. This might be 2 minutes of meditation, 5 push-ups, or writing 1 sentence. The key is choosing something so small that you can do it even on your worst days. This isn't about lowering your standards, it's about building the foundation for higher standards. Once you've established consistency with your minimum viable discipline, you can gradually increase the scope or intensity, but the foundation must be rock solid first. Schedule your disciplined actions like appointments with yourself. Don't leave them to chance or wait for free time that may never come. Decide exactly when and where you'll take these actions, and treat these commitments with the same seriousness you'd treat important professional obligations. Create what I call environmental supports, changes to your physical environment that make disciplined action easier and undisciplined action harder. If you want to exercise in the morning, lay out your workout clothes the night before. If you want to write daily, set up your workspace and eliminate distractions before you need to use it. Develop implementation intentions, if-then plans that remove decision-making from the moment of action. Instead of relying on willpower in the moment, you've predetermined your response to common scenarios. If I feel tired when my alarm goes off, then I will get up immediately and splash cold water on my face. Track your consistency, not just your results. Keep a simple record of whether you follow through on your commitment each day. This visual representation of your consistency becomes powerful evidence for your growing discipline and helps you identify patterns that support or undermine your success. Most importantly, practice self-compassion when you inevitably fall short of perfect execution. Discipline isn't about never failing. It's about returning to your commitments quickly after failure without allowing lapses to become collapses. The goal is progress, not perfection. The freedom paradox. Perhaps the most counterintuitive aspect of developing discipline is that it actually creates more freedom, not less. While it might seem that acting regardless of your feelings would be constraining or joyless, the opposite is typically true. When your actions depend on motivation, you're constantly at the mercy of your emotional state. You can't plan with confidence because you don't know if you'll feel motivated when the time comes to act. You can't build momentum because your efforts are sporadic. You can't trust yourself with important goals because your follow-through is unpredictable. But when you develop the ability to act independently of your feelings, you gain tremendous freedom. You can make commitments knowing you'll follow through regardless of how you feel. You can pursue meaningful goals without waiting for inspiration. You can build the life you want rather than the life your emotions happen to create. This freedom extends beyond specific achievements to your entire relationship with yourself. You develop what I call self-trust, the deep confidence that comes from knowing you can rely on yourself to do what you say you'll do. This self-trust then becomes the foundation for taking bigger risks, pursuing more meaningful goals, and living with greater authenticity. Many people discover that disciplined action, rather than being mechanical or joyless, actually creates space for more genuine enjoyment and creativity. When you're not constantly negotiating with yourself about whether to follow through on commitments, mental energy is freed up for more meaningful pursuits. The disciplined writer, for example, often finds that removing the daily decision about whether to write allows their creativity to flow more freely during their writing time. The disciplined athlete often discovers that consistent training creates a deeper appreciation for their body's capabilities and the meditative aspects of physical movement. Integration and mastery. As these principles become integrated into your daily life, something profound shifts in your relationship with goals, challenges, and your own potential. Action stops feeling like something you have to force and starts feeling like a natural expression of who you are. You begin to trust yourself in ways that seemed impossible when you were dependent on motivation. You know that when you commit to something important, you'll follow through regardless of circumstances. This reliability becomes a superpower that allows you to pursue goals that would have seemed unrealistic when your actions were subject to the whims of motivation. The transformation goes beyond productivity or achievement. When you consistently honor commitments to yourself, you develop a deeper sense of personal integrity and self-respect. You become someone who can be trusted, not just by others, but by yourself, with dreams that matter. Most importantly, you discovered that the real value wasn't in replacing motivation with discipline, it was in developing the capacity to act from a place of authentic choice rather than emotional compulsion. You learn to choose your actions based on your values, your long-term vision, and your commitment to growth rather than your momentary feelings. This creates a profound sense of personal agency, the recognition that you have genuine power to shape your life through your choices, regardless of circumstances, emotions, or external conditions. You become someone who creates results rather than someone who waits for results to happen to them. The journey from motivation-dependent action to disciplined mastery ultimately reveals that the most important freedom isn't freedom from discipline, it's freedom through discipline. When you can act independently of your feelings, you're free to pursue what truly matters to you rather than only what you happen to feel like doing in any given moment. This is how replacing motivation with discipline transforms not just your achievements, but your entire experience of being human. You move from being at the mercy of your emotional weather to being the captain of your own ship, capable of sailing toward your chosen destination regardless of the conditions you encounter along the way. The process requires patience, self-compassion, and consistent practice. But the destination, becoming someone who can be trusted with their own dreams and who acts from authentic choice rather than emotional compulsion, makes every step of the journey worthwhile. This is the true power that lies beyond motivation, waiting for anyone willing to develop the discipline to claim it.